Why don't you just admit it? My daughter's voice cut through the laughter at the dinner table like a knife. Everyone froze, forks halfway to their mouths, eyes shifting toward her. Then she said the words that knocked the breath out of me. You're nothing but a burden now. I felt like I'd been slapped. My chest tightened, my hands went cold, and I just stared at her, the little girl I had raised alone. The child I had given my whole life to, a burden. That's what she thought of me. Around us, silence spread quickly. Relatives avoided my eyes, some pretending they hadn't heard, while others waited wide-eyed to see if I'd respond. But I couldn't. My throat was locked, and my tongue felt too heavy to move. In my mind, memories rushed in her tiny hand holding mine at her father's funeral. The long nights I spent at the sewing machine just to buy her school supplies. The mornings I skipped meals so she wouldn't have to. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, now crushed into one cruel word. I wanted to remind her of those days, to tell her she was wrong. But when I looked into her eyes, I realized she didn't want to remember. She wanted to forget. You've done nothing for me. She pushed on, her voice sharper now, almost daring me to fight back. You've held me back my whole life, don't you get it? I'm better off without you. The gasp around the table was loud this time. Someone's glass hit the table too hard, the clink echoing in the heavy silence. I swallowed hard, forcing back the tears. My pride begged me to get up, to leave, to never look back. But something deep inside kept me seated, because I knew something she didn't. Yes, she had forgotten the sacrifices. She had forgotten the love that built this home. She had forgotten the promise I made to her father as he lay dying. But I had not. And she didn't know about the money her father had secretly left, trusting only me to keep it safe for her future. She thought I had nothing left, that she had taken every shred of dignity from me. But she was wrong. One day, when the time was right, I would remind her who I truly was, and what her father had left behind. Maybe tonight was that night. Long before these cruel words echoed across the dinner table, there was a time when my daughter clung to me like I was her only anchor in the world. And in truth, I was her father. My husband wasn't supposed to leave us so soon. We had plans, dreams, and a future we built in quiet talks and late-night whispers. But life doesn't ask for permission. One morning, illness came fast and merciless. Before I could even understand what was happening, I was holding his frail hand, hearing him whisper his last wish. Take care of our little girl. Promise me. I promised. From that moment on, my life was no longer about me, it became about her. Raising her alone meant long nights spent over a sewing machine, my eyes burning with exhaustion as I patched neighbors' clothes for a few extra coins. It meant double shifts at the diner, smiling through back pain so tips could cover the bills. It meant selling the jewelry he gave me on our anniversary, just to keep food on the table. But for her, I did it all without hesitation. I remember the nights she crawled into bed beside me, her little arms wrapping around my waist as she whispered, "Mama, don't let go." And I never did. I held her until she drifted into sleep, safe from the shadows of grief. Every birthday, no matter how broke we were, I made it special: a homemade cake, dollar store balloons, a toy she'd been dreaming of. The way her eyes lit up made every sacrifice worth it. On her first day of school, when she turned to wave from the classroom door, my heart swelled with both pride and heartbreak. She was growing, moving forward, and I promised myself I would never let anything hold her back. She never knew about the nights I went hungry, so she wouldn't. She never saw me crying quietly in the kitchen, making sure she believed everything was fine. To her, life seemed stable and safe. That was my goal all along, to make her feel secure, even when my own world was falling apart. Through all of it, I carried one secret, a promise I had kept but never spoken aloud. Her father had left something for her, a small account he built over time, saving little by little whenever he could. I never told her. She was too young back then, and later, I kept waiting for the right moment. I wanted her to be old enough to not just see the money, but to understand the love and sacrifice behind it. But as the years went by, something in her began to change. At first, it was small. She didn't want me walking her to school anymore. She pulled her hand away when I tried to hold it in public. She rolled her eyes when I reminded her to study or to be careful. I told myself it was just normal teenage stuff. Kids want independence. They pushed their parents away. I believed my little girl was still in there somewhere, and that once the storm passed, she'd come back to me. But the storm didn't pass. It grew worse. She started surrounding herself with people who whispered in her ear about the kind of life she deserved. They talked about money, luxury, and freedom, teaching her that sacrifice was weakness and gratitude was unnecessary. Slowly, she stopped seeing me as her protector and started seeing me as an obstacle. The little girl who once ran into my arms on stormy nights was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder. Still, I held on to hope. Hope was all I had. Even as she drifted further away, I never stopped loving her, never stopped protecting her, never stopped guarding her father's secret. I just never expected that before she was ready to hear it, she would look me in the eye and call me a burden. That's the thing about time, it steals your children right out of your arms. One day, they're clinging to your leg, begging you not to leave them at school, and the next they're slamming doors in your face, embarrassed to be seen with you. I felt every change in her like a cut against my heart. The little girl who once taped crayon drawings of us on the fridge had become a teenager, rolling her eyes when I asked her to be home on time. "Mom, I'm not a kid anymore," she'd snap, irritation dripping from her voice. She didn't want my reminders, my concern, or my warnings. What she wanted was freedom. Freedom from rules, freedom from responsibility, and in time, freedom from me. At first, I kept telling myself it was just a phase. Everyone warned me about teenage years, about slammed doors and raised voices. But what I wasn't ready for was how easily she began to see me not as her mother but as deadweight holding her back. She spent more and more time with friends who wore the latest clothes, who bragged about money and luxury, as if that was the only thing worth living for. I saw how she admired them, how badly she wanted that world, and slowly, I became the enemy, not because I hadn't loved her, not because I hadn't provided, but because I reminded her of what we didn't have. I worked double shifts to keep the lights on, but she wanted designer shoes. I saved every spare penny for her college, but she wanted weekend trips with friends. Every no I gave planted a seed of resentment, and those seeds grew into thorns that pushed us further apart. I'll never forget the first time she screamed, "You've never given me anything." The words flew out of her mouth in anger because I refused to buy something we couldn't afford. But they didn't leave me. They sank deep into my chest and stayed there long after the fight was over. Never given her anything. I had given her everything, every piece of me, every dream, every sacrifice. But the cruel truth was this: the more I gave, the less she seemed to see it. My sacrifices became invisible. My love became expected. Gratitude simply disappeared. And then came Daniel. Smooth talking, always charming, always acting like he was better than everyone else. From the first moment I met him, I knew he wasn't just interested in my daughter, he was interested in what she could give him. He looked around our home like a man appraising property, calculating, measuring, and he slipped into her life so easily, filling her head with promises of a brighter future, a world I could never provide, and she believed him. Suddenly, every argument ended with, "Daniel says." My words didn't matter anymore. My warnings were brushed aside. My advice was a joke. She clung to him the way she once clung to me, and it broke something deep inside me. But what hurt most wasn't just that she trusted him more than MIT, was that she began to see me through his eyes. A woman stuck in the past, a mother too cautious, too simple, too small-minded to understand the life they dreamed of building, and from that point on, the house that had once been filled with warmth grew colder with every passing day. She stopped eating dinner with me. She stopped telling me about her day, her victories, or her worries. Our conversations turned into short instructions, complaints, or worse, silence. But even then, I never stopped being her mother. I still left the porch light on when she stayed out late, waiting for the sound of the door creaking open. I still packed her food, even when she waved it away. And every night, I still prayed that she would remember who she was, who we were, before it was too late. But the cracks between us were already spreading. Every time she rolled her eyes or sighed with annoyance, I felt those cracks grow deeper. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything broke apart. One night, after a bitter argument, she stormed down the hallway, her words echoing behind her. "You're holding me back. You've always held me back." I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the dishes in the sink, my hands shaking. Held her back. All I had ever done was fight to push her forward, to give her more than I ever had. It was then I realized that love alone wasn't enough anymore. No matter how much I gave, no matter how much I sacrificed, she no longer saw me as her mother. She was beginning to see me as her burden. The house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread, that night scents that used to mean comfort, safety, family. I had spent all afternoon cooking, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this dinner would ease the tension between us. Family dinners had always been sacred in this house. There were moments when laughter covered up worries, when stories tied generations together. But that night, the warmth never came. Relatives filled the dining room, their voices cheerful at first. My daughter sat across from me, Daniel beside her, his hand resting on hers. She smiled at him more than she looked at me. Each time she did, I felt something tighten inside. I tried to join the conversations, to laugh at old jokes, to ask about work and school. But whenever I spoke, her eyes flickered with impatience, as though my words embarrassed her. Daniel whispered something in her ear, and she giggled, a sharp, dismissive sound that felt like a door slamming in my face. Halfway through dinner, a cousin asked her about her future. Would she move out, travel, start a career? She straightened in her chair, her eyes lighting up. Daniel and I have been talking about getting our own place, she said, somewhere nicer, somewhere that actually feels like home. The table murmured with polite interest, but my chest tightened at that word, home. This is your home, I said softly, forcing a smile. It always has been. She looked at me then, her eyes cold. No, Mom, this is your home, not mine. The words cut deep, though she didn't even flinch when she said them. I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. I built this place for us, for you. Daniel leaned forward, his tone smooth. And you've done well, but maybe it's time she starts fresh. She's grown now. She deserves independence. Relatives shifted uneasily, nodding without meeting my eyes. My face burned with shame, but I tried to keep my composure. Of course, she's grown. But this house will always be here for her, for family. That's when my daughter laughed, sharp and bitter. Family? You call this family? You're the one clinging to the past, Mom. You're the one who refuses to move on. You've done nothing for me except hold me back. Her voice rose above the table, cutting through every other sound. Forks froze midair. Conversations died instantly. And then came the final blow. Cruel, merciless. You're nothing but a burden now. The words echoed in my ears, louder than all the laughter that had once filled this home. A burden. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. Around me, relatives shifted in discomfort. One cleared his throat, another stared down at her plate. Number one spoke. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to remind her of the nights I worked until dawn, of the sacrifices I made so she would never go without. I wanted to scream that she was wrong, that I was her mother, not her burden. But my voice failed me. I sat frozen in my chair, the hum of the refrigerator, suddenly the loudest sound in the world. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, daring me to bite. And for the first time, I saw no trace of the little girl who once ran into my arms for comfort. Daniel squeezed her hand, smirking like he had just won. My gaze dropped. I couldn't bear the weight of all those eyes on me. My humiliation lay bare in front of the very family I had spent my whole life trying to hold together. The silence after her words stretched on until someone coughed and quickly changed the subject, but the damage was already done. The meal dragged forward, but I couldn't taste the food. My hands shook each time I lifted my fork, my throat too tight to swallow. Across the table, my daughter laughed at something Daniel whispered, as if her cruel words hadn't just shattered me in front of everyone. In that moment, something inside me cracked. She saw me as a burden that was the truth she had spoken, for all to hear. But what she didn't know was that I still carried a promise. She didn't know about the account her father had left behind, the one I had guarded all these years. She thought I had nothing left to give. But one day, she would find out how wrong she was. That night, after the plates were cleared and the last guest slipped out with awkward smiles and half-hearted goodbyes, the silence inside the house pressed down on me. Her words still rang in my ears. Burden. I couldn't scrub it away. I couldn't forget the cold look in her eyes, or the smug calm on Daniel's face as she said it. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, staring at the floor. I thought I would cry, but the tears never came. Instead, there was a hollow ache, a kind of emptiness worse than grief. Grief is sharp and sudden. But this was slow and endless, heavy realization that my own daughter no longer saw me as her mother, but as dead weight. That night, memories attacked me. The nights I worked double shifts so she could have new shoes. The mornings I packed her lunches, rushing out the door, late myself. The birthdays I stretched pennies and prayers to make feel magical so she wouldn't miss her father so much. Every sacrifice played in my mind, and each one made her words sting sharper. You've never given me anything. You're holding me back. You're nothing but a burden now. I asked myself if I had failed her. Had I raised her wrong? Maybe I had given her too much. Maybe I had shielded her from the struggle of life so completely that she never learned what it costs to survive. At that dinner table, I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to shout that she was wrong. But looking into her cold eyes that night, I realized the truth didn't matter anymore. She no longer cared about the sacrifices. She only saw the resentment. The next morning, the house felt different. She walked past me in the kitchen without a word, her face glued to her phone. Her laughter saved for Daniel on the other end of the line. She didn't even glance my way, as if I were already a ghost, haunting a house that no longer belonged to me. For a moment, I thought about leaving, packing a bag, walking away, disappearing from her life so she could feel what freedom really was without me. Maybe then she'd understand what absence meant. But every time that thought came, I remembered my promise, her father's hand in mine, his weak voice begging, take care of her. I couldn't abandon her, not even when she treated me like this. That night, I overheard her talking in the living room with Daniel. Her voice was low, sharp. She doesn't get it. She clings to this house like it's her achievement. She's just in the way. Daniel's voice was calm, too calm. Then maybe it's time you set boundaries. She can't be part of every decision anymore. This is your life now. My stomach twisted as I leaned against the hallway wall, my heart pounding. They were making plans a life that didn't include me. My daughter, my only child, was pushing me out piece by piece, with his hand guiding hers. I went to bed that night feeling like a stranger in my own home. For the first time in years, I questioned everything. Was I clinging to a past that was already gone? Was I truly a burden, just like she said? But then my eyes drifted to the drawer of my nightstand. Inside, untouched for years, was the envelope, the papers her father had left with me, the secret I had carried, the promise I had kept. I never told her because I wanted her to grow into the kind of woman who would understand not just the numbers on the page, but the love and sacrifice behind them. Now, I wasn't sure that day would ever come. And yet, as her cruel words echoed in my head, a spark flickered inside me. She thought I was nothing. She thought I had nothing. But she didn't know the whole story. Maybe it was time she did. The days after that dinner blurred together, each one heavy with silence. The house that once rang with laughter now felt like a cage. Every room suffocated me with memories of what used to be. My daughter barely looked at me anymore, walking past as though I were invisible. Her conversations were saved only for Daniel now. I tried to ignore the small changes, but they were impossible to miss. Her bedroom door was always shut. Meals were no longer shared at the kitchen table we once gathered around. Even the porch light I left on for her at night, she switched it off before I even realized she was home. It felt like she was slowly erasing me from her life, piece by piece, until nothing of me remained. Some nights, I thought about leaving. I pictured myself packing a small bag, walking out the door, and never coming back. She wanted independence so badly. Maybe she needed to taste what it truly felt like. Maybe then she would finally understand what my presence meant. But every time I imagined leaving, I heard her father's voice again. That last night, when his hand was weak but his grip strong, he had whispered, "Take care of her. Promise me you'll take care of her." And I had promised, a promise made out of love and grief, a promise heavier than her cruel words could ever be. So I stayed. But staying didn't make the pain fade, it made it worse. One evening, as I walked past the living room, I heard her voice, sharp and thoughtless. I don't know why she still tries. She has nothing, no savings, no retirement, nothing to show for her life. Honestly, she's pathetic. That word hit me harder than burden ever had. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and I pressed against the wall, fighting back tears. Pathetic. After everything, after the long nights, the sacrifices, the quiet battles I had fought, just so she could have more, I carried that word back to my room like a stone chained to my chest. This time, the tears came, hot and bitter, rolling down my face as I sat on the edge of the bed. I wept not only for myself, but for her, for my daughter, who had lost her way, who couldn't even recognize love when it was all around her. For days afterward, the word haunted me. Pathetic. It followed me while I cooked, while I worked, while I moved through a house that no longer felt like my own. But beneath the grief, something else began to stir. One night, I opened the drawer of my nightstand. My hands trembled as I pulled out the envelope, its edges worn, its paper faded, but still intact. Inside were the papers her father had left me years ago, proof of his love, proof of his sacrifice, proof of the secret account he had quietly built, the one meant to give her a future when she was ready. I had kept it hidden, waiting for her to grow mature enough to see not just the money, but the love and sacrifice behind it. But now, I wondered if she would ever be ready. As I stared at those papers, a new thought took hold. Why should I keep this secret any longer? Why should I shield her from the truth when she had no problem tearing me down in front of others? The memory of her calling me a burden still burned. The word pathetic cut even deeper. No, I wouldn't stay silent anymore. Her father's sacrifice, my sacrifice, wasn't something to be hidden or dismissed. It was time, she knew. I folded the papers carefully, slipped them back into the envelope, and tucked it into my purse. My decision was made. The next time she tried to call me nothing, I would show her exactly who I was, not a burden, not pathetic, but the woman who had carried her father's promise all these years. The next family dinner was quieter than usual. Maybe everyone still remembered her cruel words from the last time we gathered. The laughter felt forced, the smiles thin. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, listening more than speaking. She sat across from me, with Daniel by her side. He filled the room with his loud voice and easy jokes. She laughed at them, but even her laughter sounded hollow now. I barely touched my food. My stomach was too tight, my mind fixed on the envelope, in my purse. For weeks I had debated revealing it, but after everything, after being called a burden, after being dismissed as pathetic, I knew the moment had come. As the plates were cleared and the room grew quiet, I reached into my purse. My fingers didn't shake this time. My resolve was stronger than my fear. I have something to share, I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the chatter like glass. The table went completely silent. Every pair of eyes turned to me. My daughter rolled her eyes and muttered, "Here we go again." I set the envelope in the middle of the table. My voice was calm but firm. For years, I've stayed quiet. I let you believe what you wanted, that I had nothing, that I was clinging to a life that was long gone. But you've forgotten something. You've forgotten the man who built this family before he was taken from us. And you've forgotten the promise I made to him. For a second, her face softened, but then she straightened again. What are you talking about? I looked straight at her. Your father left you something. A secret account. I've kept it hidden all these years, waiting for the day you were ready to understand it. Not just what it is, but what it means. Gasps rippled around the table. Daniel leaned forward, his smirk slipping. What kind of account? I ignored him, keeping my eyes on my daughter. Every extra dollar your father could save, he put away. Every side job, every late shift. He tucked something aside, not for himself, but for you, for us. He wanted you to have a future, no matter what happened to him. Her face paled. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The relatives leaned closer, whispering. I opened the envelope and pushed the papers across the table, toward her. It's all here. Years of sacrifice. Quiet, unseen, but never absent. While you were calling me a burden, while you told the world I gave you nothing, I was protecting this, protecting his gift, protecting you. The silence was heavy. She reached for the papers with shaking hands, scanning the numbers, the deposits, the years of effort behind them. Her hand covered her mouth. This can't be real. It's real, I said softly. Every cent is a piece of your father's life, and every day since he died, I've carried the weight of it alone. Because he trusted me, because he asked me to. Her eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hold them back. Why? Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready, I said. I wanted you to grow up knowing that life isn't about what you're given, it's about what you earn. I wanted you to understand sacrifice, to honor love. But somewhere along the way, you forgot. You let bitterness blind you. You called me a burden when I was the one keeping your father's last gifts safe for you. No one spoke. Even Daniel looked unsettled now, his jaw tight. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. I won't sit quietly anymore. You may see me as nothing, but your father didn't. And one day, you'll realize that everything I did was out of love, not weakness. I left the envelope on the table and straightened my back. I didn't wait for excuses or tears. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had spoken my truth. For the first time in years, I walked away with my head held high. The envelope sat there, like a stone dropped into still water, its ripples spreading through the silence. My daughter's hands shook as she flipped through the pages again, her eyes darting over the numbers, her face shifting from disbelief to shock to something else, shame creeping in, fighting against the pride she held so tightly. "You lied," she whispered, her voice breaking. "All this time, you kept this from me." I didn't flinch. It wasn't a lie. It was protection. "Your father didn't save that money for you to throw away the moment you thought you were ready. He saved it because he wanted you to have a future, and he trusted me to guard it until you understood what it meant." Her lower lip trembled, but before she could speak, Daniel jumped in, his tone sharp. "This is manipulation. Can't you see? She's trying to guilt you, to control you. Money in some dusty account doesn't erase the fact that she's been dead weight on you." I turned on him, my voice like ice. "Be very careful with your words. You want to talk about weight. Let me tell you about weight. I carried this family alone after your father-in-law died. I carried a little girl through grief that could have crushed her. I worked until my hands bled to make sure she never went to bed hungry. That's weight. That's sacrifice. Something you clearly know nothing about." The guests shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking back and forth between us. No one dared break the silence. The air was so heavy, it felt like the whole house was holding its breath. My daughter slammed the papers on the table, her voice cracking. "Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you think I was ready?" Tears burned my eyes, but I kept them back. "Because you called me a burden. Because you said I had done nothing. For you, if I had given you this before tonight, you would have only seen numbers. You wouldn't have seen the love and sacrifice behind them. I couldn't let your father's last gift be treated like just money." Her face crumpled. The pride and arrogance she always wore broke under the truth. Tears ran down her cheeks, smudging her makeup. I didn't know. I didn't see." "No," I said firmly, though not unkind. "You chose not to see. That's what hurt the most." She bowed her head, sobs shaking her shoulders. The room was silent except for her crying. Daniel tried to take her hand, but she pulled away as if his touch burned. I stepped closer, my voice softer. "I never wanted worship or endless thanks. I only wanted respect, a little gratitude, a little love. Instead, you gave me cruelty. You believed people who told you I was worthless. But tonight, you know the truth, not because of money, but because of what it represents. Your father's faith in me, and my promise to him." Her tear-streaked face lifted, eyes wide with regret. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." I nodded. "Yes, but admitting it is the first step. Now maybe you can remember who you really are, the girl your father and I raised with love. The girl who once believed family mattered more than anything." She broke down, rushing into my arms, clinging like the little girl who once held me on stormy nights. "I'm sorry, Mom," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." I held her tightly, tears finally spilling from my own eyes. Around us, the relatives watched quietly. Their judgment had softened into something else, respect, maybe even admiration. Daniel sat stiff and silent, his presence shrinking against the weight of truth. For the first time in years, I felt my daughter's heart against mine. Beating, fast, fragile, but real. The secret was no longer mine to carry. It had become the bridge back to her. The days after were strangely calm. No cruel words. No raised voices. The silence in the house was no longer hostile but thoughtful. I replayed that dinner in my head, the look in her eyes when the truth broke through, the crack in her pride, her sobs as she held me. I had always dreamed of her realizing my sacrifices, but never imagined it would happen like that. And yet, even after the relief, I knew wounds that deep don't heal overnight. Love can forgive, but trust takes time. She avoided me at first, not with anger, but with shame. I heard her moving quietly in the kitchen, lingering by the window. Sometimes I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. Her eyes were softer, searching, unsure how to mend the gap she had created. I didn't push her. Healing can't be forced. I gave her space and turned inward. For the first time in years, I breathed without fear of being unwanted. I returned to the garden. The tomatoes had grown wild, weeds everywhere, but I felt peace as I worked the soil. Dirt under my nails, sun on my face, it felt like life again. The garden was a mirror of me, messy, scarred, weathered by storms, but alive, always alive. One afternoon, I saw her standing at the edge of the yard, watching me. She said nothing, didn't step closer. She just stood there, heavy with words she couldn't yet speak. For a moment, I thought about calling her over, handing her the trowel, asking her to join me, but I didn't. Sometimes silence speaks enough, sometimes presence is enough. And in that quiet, I realized something important. Telling the truth set me free. For years, I carried the pain of her rejection quietly, hoping that if I just stayed silent, she'd eventually come back to me. But that silence nearly broke me. Finally speaking up about the account, yes, but also about the love and sacrifices behind it, changed everything. It was the moment I decided who I was and who I refused to become. I wasn't a burden, I wasn't weak or pathetic. I was her mother, and that alone was enough. Whether she was ready to rebuild our relationship or not, I finally understood that my worth didn't depend on her approval. It lived in every sacrifice I had made, every promise I kept, and every quiet act of love that had shaped her life as well as mine. Still, deep inside, I hoped she'd find her way back to me. I hoped one day she wouldn't just see me standing there, but truly understand me. Because forgiveness isn't only about leaving the past behind, it's about choosing a future together. And for the first time in years, I believed we might still have one. Almost a week later, she finally spoke to me, not as a quick good morning or a simple question, but real words, carrying the weight of everything unsaid between us. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard her footsteps. She stood in the doorway for a moment, quiet, almost afraid. I could feel her hesitation in the air. Then her small, shaky voice broke the silence. "Mom," I turned, drying my hands on a towel. Her eyes were red and tired, as if she hadn't slept for days. She took a deep breath, and then the words I had waited so long to hear finally came out. "I'm sorry." Her voice cracked, and tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She covered her face with one hand, shaking her head. "I don't even know how to say it. I've been blind. I've been cruel. You gave me everything, and I treated you like you were nothing. I don't know why I ever believed that." I stood quietly, giving her space to pour out what had been trapped inside her heart. Tears streamed down her face as she went on. "Daniel made me feel like I didn't need you, like you were holding me back. But the truth is," she struggled to get the words out, "the truth is, I wouldn't even be here without you. I've been selfish, ungrateful, and I don't know if you can ever forgive me." I stepped closer, my chest aching and mending at the same time. "Oh, my sweet girl," I whispered, my own eyes burning with tears. "I forgave you the moment you said it, not because you were right, but because I love you, and that will never change." She collapsed into my arms, crying against my shoulder, like she used to when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. I held her tight, rocking her gently, letting her sob until the storm inside her passed. We stayed like that for a long time, just mother and daughter, broken but slowly piecing ourselves back together. In the days that followed, the changes came softly, almost shyly. She started sitting with me at the table again, leaving her phone in another room. She offered to help in the kitchen, fumbling with recipes, laughing at her mistakes, but eager to try. In the evenings, she sat beside me, sometimes in quiet, sometimes sharing bits of her day, like she was carefully stitching back the bond she had once torn apart. One afternoon, I found her kneeling in the garden, hands dirty from pulling weeds. She looked up at me with a sheepish smile. "I thought I'd help. You've done enough on your own." My throat tightened, but I smiled back. "We'll do it together," I said, and we did. For the first time in years, the garden felt alive again, not just because of the flowers, but because of us. Side by side, mother and daughter, not only tending soil and roots, but growing back trust and love. I knew the past couldn't be erased, but I also knew the future was still ours to shape. And maybe that was the real gift, not the account, not the money, but the chance to begin again. I just wanted her to feel whole again. And in that moment, watching her laugh gently in the sunlight, I believed she could be. You know, sometimes, the deepest hurt doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the people we love most. To hear the word burden from the very child you gave up everything for, that's the kind of pain that shatters a heart in ways nothing else can. But this story is also about hope. It shows that when the truth is spoken with honesty and courage, even the deepest wounds can start to heal. For years, I carried my husband's secret, protecting his gift and honoring his memory, even while facing rejection from the one person it was meant to protect. And when the time finally came to share it, it wasn't money that changed her, it was realizing the depth of the love and sacrifice behind it. Maybe you've felt something like that too, overlooked, unappreciated, or pushed aside by someone you would give the world to. If so, please remember this: your love and sacrifices are never wasted. One day, they will be seen for what they truly are. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever carried a hidden sacrifice for someone you love? And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Because love, even when it's ignored or forgotten, always leaves a legacy. That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.